Fiddlesticks, the immobile, low-range jungler with no escapes, is now being played in top lane. This is Cabex, a player who picked Fiddlesticks top and within 13 days became a Grandmaster player, shooting up to an insane rank when he'd never even played this champion before. How can this immobile champion work in such a long lane? Well, I interviewed him to find out and discovered that Fiddle top is actually a very good laner, fearing, silencing and refusing to take any damage from the enemy, and using his healing to prevent enemies from trading or diving him. Then very quickly he starts to take over teamfights with huge damage, as well as some cool new tricks to extend the fear range on his ult. With some of the best ults I've ever seen, game-changing and game-winning plays this guy pulls out of nowhere against Grandmaster and Challenger players. This is Topplesticks, the new terror of solo queue. But first, what can you spot in this footage? Here I am in my beautiful apartment, working on the balcony, watching some League in my office, chilling in bed doing some work, and even in my amazing living room. Look at that decor. Except there is one problem. This is all fake. I'm in a store. All fake except for one thing. Our brilliant sponsor, the Alienware M18. An incredible laptop that is as real as it gets. With some brilliant specs, as well as very good reviews, it has nothing to hide. They sent me this laptop for a review, and with specs going up to Intel i9 RTX 4080, 60GB of DDR5 RAM, up to 9TB of storage built in, and of course this beautiful 18-inch screen, 165Hz Quad HD. I never knew a laptop could look so cinematic, so I gave it a test with as many AAA games as I could find, as well as, of course, some video editing, and I have to admit I did play League of Legends as well. As expected, it crushes anything you throw at it. League has perfect FPS on maximum settings, AAA games look like they're being played on a flat screen TV, they're so vivid, and run at ultra settings no problem. Having this powerful of a laptop lets me work anywhere on any project. This one's especially great for home and office use. The 18-inch screen is big, and the performance of course requires some powerful components. But if you want a better work-life balance, I highly recommend it. So if you want a new battle station that is still very portable, I highly recommend you check out the M18 at the link in the description. Back to our player Cabex, known as Drunken Stain on EU West. Starting League in Season 2, it wasn't a success story. He was stuck in Bronze for 4 full years with no progress, only escaping in Season 5 to get to Silver. By Season 7 he found some success with top lane, making his way to Platinum, and over time he kept improving with this newfound process. He became bored of top and wanted something new, so he swapped to AD Carry, reaching Master and becoming a surprisingly good AD Carry player, even being accused of scripting from this popular clip with a few streamers in his game. So how did this AD Carry main suddenly become a Fiddlesticks top god? Well, after seeing a Twitter post about mid lane Fiddlesticks, it sounded interesting to him, so on June 22nd, 2023, he made an account and began to test it in Ranked, with absolutely no experience on Fiddlesticks. It went great. Lots of matchups were super good in this lane. Very quickly he climbed to low master, but at that point he became hard stuck in this lane, as he couldn't match the skill and the champions in this lane. So he decided to swap back to top lane, a lane he had played in the past to try and avoid these issues. And within only 13 days of making the account, with this new champion played in a whole new role, he hit Grandmaster 731 LP EU West. Going on a 9-game win streak to get there, he realised that top Fiddlesticks was, according to him, 10 times stronger than even mid lane or jungle. So why is he playing Fiddlesticks top? Well, compared to jungle, where Fiddlesticks is very easy to invade, has lots of bad early game matchups, and struggles to win 1v1s against lots of other junglers, top lane has none of these problems. Early game is safe, he can sustain with his healing on minions, and the champions he's facing are so much easier to poke down, or avoid completely using his fear. Not only this, but top lane also has a higher income than farming the jungle, as well as getting more XP, so he scales up much faster into an even stronger team fighter, making his ult really hurt. This pick is not a pushover in lane. Surprisingly, this pick is both a strong laner and especially a strong team fighter, so from level 1 to level 18 this pick has a lot it can do. At level 1 our player buys Doran's Ring and 2 potions, going top to wait in this bush. Checking to see where the enemy jungler started is super important, so he watches to check who leash to see if their jungler is planning on ganking top or not. He places an effigy in the river bush. This is pretty much an infinite ward, lasting 130 seconds, but the cooldown is only 115, so before it dies he'll have another one available every time, unlike a normal ward which has almost double the cooldown. He then gets to lane first as minions arrive, so he can try and pull the melee minions towards this bush. This sets up a focus fire of the enemy's minions onto one of his, creating a slow push towards Fiddlesticks, giving him more safety in top lane. Our player can now start any ability. Q is a special adaptation against champs like Jax. These champions will aim to zone you out at level 1, but if he uses his stun, you can fear him away away and stay with the wave. W start is an adaptation for lanes who have low damage at level 1 and only aim to poke you, like Illaoi or Malphite. But E is the best general option for everyone else. It gives you good poke, a CC if you use it from a bush, and the ability to CS as well from range. At level 2 you get very strong, having your Q and your E most of the time, so your short trades become unmatchable. Enemies end the trade feared and out of range to return any damage. No one is reaching Fiddlesticks top. Another great thing about top lane is that you have these 3 bushes to get more fears off. Instead of just trading straight up, he can walk into a bush and make his abilities even better, getting more CC. Playing against this is horrible, and it's one of the reasons why top is even better than mid. At level 3 he takes his W and is happy to let the wave push into him. His goal is to let the wave push and keep it in front of his tower. He even made this graphic for us. He's the blue dot and wants to keep the wave here. This situation is a bit like a checkmate for Fiddlesticks. The enemy can't trade with you as you have your fear at all times as well as a silence. He can now also force the wave to freeze by tanking it with his W. It lets him take as much damage from minions as he needs in every wave to keep it outside the tower. If the enemies hit him, their damage is wasted as he's healing from so many sources. Their damage is immediately regened. A small thing is that you also get your W cooldown refunded 60% when someone walks out of its range. So if enemies don't know about this, they might try and outplay you by walking away and then walking back in, but they're really just hurting themselves. At levels 4 to 5, playing with this freeze, slowly Fiddlesticks' wave will start to build up and push back, giving him a big wave to play with. So if enemies dare to walk up, they can be 1v1'd. He even sometimes looks for tower dives on Fiddlesticks, even against strong early game champions. He can use his really good poke to get them low health, and then stack this wave to go for a kill. Getting even better at level 6, he can ult over this wall and go for a dive with the fear. Enemies now need to be really scared. Even when he's not planning on ulting, he's constantly walking into bushes to threaten enemies. He doesn't even have to use it, but the enemies know that he can, so they have to play back and avoid walking up to a risky wave. Unlocking his sweeper at this point, he can use it in the bush to make sure he can't be seen, and he can use this trick to break the enemy freeze, zone them off the wave, or surprise them with an ult and go for a 1v1 kill. One huge strength that no one knows about that our player discovered is how hard Fiddlesticks' top is to dive. Here Fiddle is in a terrible spot, stuck under tower against a stacked wave, a perfect dive opportunity. So he uses Drain on the wave to stay high health, and when it begins he uses the fear to prevent damage, using the Drain again to tank more hits, then Silence to prevent damage, and staying alive just long enough to get a kill. He goes 1-for-1 in an awful spot thanks to his healing and CC. In the bad matchups or just situations where they're not poked down and he can't 1v1 the enemy top, our player still wants to get an advantage, and so even against challenger players like Nemesis, he can roam to mid, sweeping and ulting over this wall for a very fast and unexpected roam kill. Taking flash and teleport to every game, he uses TP to get back to lane after running out of mana and health, or to upgrade to Lost Chapter. Early game is all about absorbing as many resources as you can, as later on Fiddlesticks isn't a great side laner if he gets behind. So getting good CS, trying to get kills and trying to get plates will have a big knock-on effect to keep your champion powerful in mid-game. In mid-game, he only has one goal: go to objectives and use his ultimate. But he's not just going to them, he's looking at timers. A minute and a half before it spawns, he types that he wants to fight it with his ult. He pings it and walks over to take bush control, and then he waits. This isn't just showing up and hoping for the best, this is careful planning and execution, a rare sight in solo queue. He stresses you have to be patient, it's the most important thing about Fiddlesticks. There are situations where minions are dying in front of him, but he's still waiting in a bush for enemies to show up. He's waited for a full minute before to get a good fight. As you can see how impactful a good ultimate like this can be. Ideally try and stay in XP range of a lane so you aren't falling too far behind. There are so many good ultimate locations all around the map. Here are his favourites for mid lane, for example, from defensive ults over the wall from raptors or in the jungle, to more aggressive ones from the side bushes or even inside fog in the lane. He always places a scarecrow down to sweep and check for wards, making sure he knows for certain his ult is going to get a big fear. He even showed me some special ultimate spots he uses that are incredibly hard for enemies to spot, like this one behind tower. You don't have to be right up against the wall, you can actually be inside this bush, and then ult into the wall and still make it the whole way over. As long as your ult circle is over halfway through the wall, Fiddle can get over it. So our player's ults just look way better than most Fiddlesticks, always trying to come from a bush for the extra fog of war. This blue buff ult onto Dragon is especially powerful and just a shocking range that enemies won't see coming, but here are his special tricks to make his ult even better, extending the fear range to hit the whole enemy team. The first one is this: when ulting he wants to press R and then immediately start spamming his E as it's going off. He puts his mouse over where the enemies will be when he lands, and instantly constantly cast the silence as he arrives. This also extends the fear range, hitting them as well, completely stopping them from escaping. Potentially even better in some situations is this second trick, which does more damage. This is extending the fear range by using W flash immediately after ulting, spamming his W button as his ult is going off. As he lands, he does a W flash to extend the fear. Instead of just going for an ultimate, this play is much more likely to end the fight immediately at an important objective. It's a game-changing trick. It isn't easy to pull off, even he messes it up sometimes, so it's important to practice in Practice Tool first. The E version is much easier. The best kinds of ults are ones where enemies don't know that Fiddle can even be there, or if they have a reason to overextend to try and regain control of the game. Then suddenly a Fiddlesticks jumps out, shutting down any hope, and immediately acing them with his damage. Let's quickly take a look at a game where this pick doesn't work to see the weaknesses. It starts off great, with Fiddlesticks getting a couple of solo kills on a Jax, which is now kind of expected as this pick is really good at getting them. Mid-game goes great as well, having some good pick ultimates in bot lane. However, as the game goes on, enemies refuse to teamfight around objectives, only going for picks. Fiddle's teammates are falling behind, so they don't want to contest anything, and his team comp contains a full squishy, low CC bot lane of Xayah Senna. It's pretty much impossible for them to walk up. Fiddlesticks may be shining and ready to carry, but his team kind of collapses before he can get a good ult. It shows that this pick thrives with a teamfight comp and good frontline, but he can't pull off miracles by himself and is vulnerable to getting picked. Despite this, our player climbed with almost no experience and found a pick that has very few weaknesses. I think it has to be one of the S tier off meta picks for solo queue right now, especially because enemies will have no idea what to do about it. Our player made a matchup presentation showing how he beats each top laner, as well as the difficulty of each of them. Things like Malphite, Tryndamere, Jax are surprisingly easy matchups for Fiddle, where he can zone them off the wave and go for solo kills. Whereas something like Riven is very hard, so hard he takes Exhaust instead of TP just so he can stay alive. And Aatrox is the hardest, so we make sure to ban it every game. Link to that is in the description. For his full Fiddlesticks top build, Doran's Ring for the early damage and health, buying Luden's first against squishies or if he's snowballing, or Liandry's if he's against tanks. Rocket Belt is not good enough for top lane Fiddlesticks as you need lots of mana, then buying Sork Shoes. Next he can either go Shadow Flame if you're snowballing, or Void Staff if you're falling behind to try and get back into the game, Demonic Embrace against tanks, or a special tech of going Banshees next if he's against TF. This means that his ultimate will never reveal you in teamfights, giving you more freedom to go for more ults. Finishing the build with Deathcap, Zhonya's, or Morellonomicon as a good item if you're behind, as it has very cheap components, so you can limp into getting them easier instead of Rabadons. For his runes he takes Comet most of the time, as his E slows and fears the enemy, so the Comet is much more likely to land, with classic Fiddlesticks secondaries like Ultimate Hunter to get more ults. He can go First Strike against tanks like Ornn or Sion, as it just lets him farm more gold, and they can definitely never kill him. If you want to try this mid lane, then our player recommends banning Syndra and focusing more on roaming and following your jungler around the map to gank, as Fiddlesticks is great in 2v2 or 3v3 fights with ult. The build and runes should be the same. Kebex has a Twitch which is very active, and a YouTube with lots of Topplesticks clips. Link to both are in the description, as well as a link to our sponsor Alienware to check out their incredible M18 laptop, with options to fit any budget, up to some monstrous specs. Link below. Thanks so much for